talk about critical race theory, which is pretty much going to be teaching kids how to hate each other, how to dislike each other. That's pretty much what it's going to. That's pretty much. I don't care what you say. It's pretty much what it's going to all come down to. You're going to deliberately teach kids this white kid right here got it better than you because he white. You're going to personally tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed. How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed?
Welcome back, Warriors. It's me, Linda B, and thanks for joining me today. Today, I have another Thomas Sowell video that I want to share with you all, and he's talking about race hustlers. Yeah, we know the race hustlers out there, Ibrahim Kendi and others. You could say Reverend Al Sharpton is a race hustler, always bringing up race, always making everything about race, when sometimes it's not really about that. Race hustlers. But before we get into it, I want you all to remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, watch the video all the way to the very end. Thank you so much. Also, I'm on my way to 20,000 subscribers by the end of this month, getting very close at about 18,000 at the time of this recording. I really appreciate your support. But without further ado, let's get into it.
When we talk about equality, immediately race pops into mind. It's always about race, racial discrimination, about the founding of the nation, white dominant society, so forth and so on. And you make the case, and you've made this case throughout your life, but it's very poignant in your book, which is, wait a minute. Of course, this has some impact, but it's not the only thing that has an impact. But why? First of all, what other things have an impact? Probably an infinite list of things. And secondly, why do they only focus on race on the left?
So racism, I would define it as a collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas. Anti-racism is pretty simple using the same terms. Anti-racism is a collection of anti-racist policies leading to racial, anybody want to take a guess? Equity that are substantiated by anti-racist ideas.
Come again? I guess it's because that's proven to be a politically a popular thing to do. But in point of fact, one of the things that's mentioned in the book is a study that was done by the New York Times, of all people, some years ago, where they tried to show the 10 poorest counties in the United States. And they mentioned which ones they were and so on. It turns out that 6 of those 10 counties had a population that was from 90% to 100% white. Now, in the New York Times, they didn't mention the race of the people, but once they told me the counties, I looked it up. And in fact, I followed the average income in those 6 counties over a span of 50 years. And in all those 50 years, all 6 of those counties had a median income lower than the median income of Black Americans. Now, and so the people in those counties faced zero racism because they were white and indistinguishable from all other whites. They didn't have a legacy of slavery, and yet there they were. You have to ask then, clearly there must be other things that cause poverty. We can't just assume that because people of a given race have more poverty than some other people, that race must be the reason.
You know, sometimes I do get tired of race being brought up all the time. Um, but we have to address it in some regard, I suppose, because there are a lot of people out there that are bringing it up all the time, making everything about race. You know, some on the left, when they are Black, they sometimes, you know, when someone comes up against them or have a critique of them, the first thing they say is they're doing it because I'm Black. or they're doing it because I'm female. No, not all the time. Don't it shouldn't be that is the first thing that we go to. That should not be the go-to. And we have people like Ibrahim Kendi, who he's an author, and I've seen him on CNN when I was watching CNN. I no longer watch it. I get my news from other sources. Hopefully, you all do as well. He makes everything about race, and we have to have anti-racist laws. I'm pretty sure he's for reparations and things of that nature. I just don't think that we should blame racism for our lack of success. As you just heard Dr. Thomas Sowell say, these people in Kentucky, the poorest parts of Kentucky, were all white and indistinguishable from the other whites, but yet they had a poverty rate that was very high. Their annual income was much lower than the annual average of, in the country. So it's not that. There are other things that are causing people to be poor. And we can't always fall back, because I think sometimes that gives people who, some minorities, an excuse not to try. I've seen people say, I in my life, well, I can't do it because they're not going to let me do it. So I'm not going to try because they're not going to let me. The white people aren't going to let me. They control things. They're only going to let you get so far. That is an excuse not to try. And I'm just going to say it like it is. That is being lazy. Because in order to get somewhere, you got to have a little blood, sweat, and tears a lot of times. You got to get up early and go to bed late. You got to do more than the average person. You can't just do enough to get by. So we need to think about that and stop blaming it on somebody else. We are responsible for how successful or unsuccessful we are.
But this has become the automatic kind of thing, and I think most people would be quite surprised. One of the things that happens is that behavior matters, and you see that in so many different ways. For example, I think most people would be surprised to learn that despite the fact that blacks as a whole have a higher poverty rate than whites as a whole, black married couple families have for more than a quarter of a century, every single year, had a poverty rate under 10%. And in most of those years, the national poverty rate was not as low as 10%. So it's not a quite, and you say, well, this is due to institutional racism. In that case, does that mean that the racists make an exception for blacks who are married? I mean, do racists either know or care whether blacks are married? None of these glib explanations stands up to the slightest empirical study.
And let's talk about this when it comes to minorities generally. You have an Asian population in this country that achieves a lot as a group, intellectually, education wise, and they are discriminated against by these Ivy League colleges, by Harvard. We just had a Supreme Court decision and so forth, the way Jews were 100 years earlier, by Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and so forth. So the people who push this race issue, is it that they really care about Black people or Asian people or Jewish people? Or is it that it's just another wedge issue to try and destroy this culture and destroy this society?
There are some people who are both. Some really believe it, and I feel sorry for them. But there are some who really don't care. If it gets them elected, that's what matters. And this is one of the tragedies of trying to politicize race. Uh, there are so many fallacies that it's hard to even know which one to take up. But for example, the great narrative is that blacks rose from poverty, got into professional occupations as a result of the 1960s social welfare programs, and that this has been a big benefit. Uh, One of the problems with this way of looking at things is that everything depends on when you pick as the start of this trend. If you go back to 1940, that is 20 years before these wonderful things are supposed to have happened in the 1960s, and you discover that degree to which blacks were in poverty declined from 87% in 1940 to 47% in 1960. So it went down by 40 points in those 20 years. Now you look at the 20 years following 1960, they went down 18 points. And so the trend did not begin in the 1960s. The trend was there before then, and the trend did not even accelerate after 1960. Many people think that it would all begin with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Well, that was a fine act to get rid of the segregation laws in the South. But the cold fact is that the percentage of blacks who had professional occupations doubled from 1954 to 1964. That is in the decade ending at the time that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed. If you look at the things that are negative, like, for example, black children being raised in single-parent households. In 1940, just under 17% of black kids were raised in one-parent families. But after 1960s, before the end of the century, 4 times that many, 68% of black kids were being raised in one-parent families. And that does not depend on racism or any of the other things they talk about. It depends upon things that happened due to the policies of the 1960s, which are still going forward.
And so one of those policies is welfare, because welfare, of course, is an institution that pays women not to be married. So if you pay people not to get married, they won't get married. And there's a tendency, of course, for children born into one parent homes not to do as well in school, to get into trouble, to have a higher crime rate and teenage pregnancy rate, and everything else that you would consider not a good thing. So it looks like, and this is something we can apply to our own lives. I know all of us have a relative that we know and that we love that gets into trouble, doesn't really want to try, calls you for money, but they never call you to see how you're doing. And they always need gas money. They always need this and that. And we feel bad. We feel guilty. We give them a little something. I have a couple in my family and I feel bad. But then I've gotten to the point where when you do that, you enable them to stay where they are because they know they have a safety net. There's no incentive to try. So we really need to hold these grown people accountable and say, you're going to have to do for yourself. The more you give people too much, it's like with our kids. You can coddle them too much and it keeps them dependent. But if you let them have to work it out, then they're going to figure out, I got to do this. No one else is helping me. I got to do something. We can't enable people to stay where they are because they inevitably will just keep running back, and we're their safety net. We just give them some money and they're not even trying to work or do better on their own. So I feel like welfare did that to Black people in America because it kind of keeps you dependent rather than independent. And we should focus on God anyway. We shouldn't be looking for the government or white people or anybody to take care of any other group of people. We're responsible for our own success. We got to make the decision. Do I get up and go get a trade or go to college, or do I just sit back and squalor and just get enough to survive but not thrive? We need to wake up.
Which encourage the dissolution of the family. It's just unbelievable.
Now, they're saying the quiet part out loud. They would like to ban the entire teaching of racism. Think about how silly that is. If you ban the teaching of racism, some of you may say, well, that may be a good idea, Doc. I mean, we can now focus on things like unity. You really think so? If they ban racism, how do you now teach Dr. King?
That's true.
If you ban racism, how do you teach Gandhi? If you ban racism, how do you teach the civil rights movement in America? As a matter of fact, if you ban the teaching of racism, how can you ever understand the true origins of America?
Come again?
How can you ever understand the true origins of America?
Another book that is on the summer reading for 3rd through 5th grade is a book called Stamped for Kids, again by Ibrahim Kendi. I read the entirety of the book, and I will say it is an astonishing book. On page 33, it asks the question, can we send white people back to Europe? That's on 33. That's what's being given to 8 and 9 years old. It also, on page 115, says the idea that we should pretend not to see racism is connected to the idea that we should pretend not to see color. It's called color blindness. Skipping ahead, here's what's wrong with this. It's ridiculous. Skin color is something we all absolutely see. Skipping ahead, so to pretend not to see color is pretty convenient if you don't actually want to stamp out racism in the first place. Now, what this book argues for is the exact opposite of what Dr. King spoke about on the floor of the Lincoln Memorial.
You talk about critical race theory, which is pretty much going to be teaching kids how to hate each other, how to dislike each other. That's pretty much what it's going to, that's pretty much, I don't care what you say, it's pretty much what it's going to all come down to. You're going to deliberately teach kids, this white kid right here got it better than you because he white? You're going to purposely tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed. How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed? How did I get, first of all, time up, because I only got 5 minutes now, 5 minutes.
It is sad that we are even contemplating something like critical race theory, where children will be separated by their skin color and deemed permanently oppressors or oppressed in 2021. That is not teaching the truth, unless you believe that whites are better than blacks. I have personally heard teachers teaching CRT, and we have had an assembly shut down because Duval County Public School System consultant thought it would be a great idea to separate students by race. This is unacceptable.
CRT is not an honest dialogue. It is a tactic that was used by Hitler and the Ku Klux Klan on slavery very many years ago to dumb down my ancestors. You cannot tell me what is or is not racist. Look at me. I had to come down here today to tell you to your face that we are coming together and we are strong. This will not be the last. Greet and meet respectfully.
Wow. Wow. That was something. And I heard about critical race theory a few years ago. At first, when I heard it, I was like, I didn't even know what it was. But then when I found out about it, it's separating people by skin color. This is what the Democrats or liberal side of things do. They take us backward, and they want to say the Republicans want to, or the conservative side wants to take us backward. Well, you keep bringing that skin color, you keep focusing on the past, you keep separating people by skin color and say, remember, they are the oppressors and you are the oppressed. You saw the parents there. No one's oppressed. I'm not oppressed. I get up and do whatever I feel God wants me to do, whatever I want a lot of times. I'm not oppressed. Not a victim. So we need to get rid of this victim mindset because it is really a way to keep us divided. And that's what those on the left do. There are so many race hustlers. I cannot believe Dr. Ibrahim Kendi's book said, send the white people back to Europe. What the heck? He need to go somewhere. Seriously. Just go somewhere on a lone island, somewhere, reevaluate yourself. Have an island of Patmos moment like John in the book of Revelation. Just have a moment with the Lord. Get yourself right. You all tell me what you think. There is the whole thing with the media about separating people by race. You know, I used to watch CNN and they would only report when the police officer was white and there was a shooting of an unarmed Black person. And the way they would say it in the news, they would put emphasis on the word white. They would say a white officer. Okay, I heard you. You don't really have to put all that extra enunciation on it. Shot and killed a Black unarmed youth. And then they had the panel at the news desk talking about race over and over, and it was being pounded and pounded. It's trying to make us hate each other. We have to realize what's going on. Because if you feed yourself that on a daily basis, get a daily diet of hate, what do you think is going to happen? We have to be careful about what we let our eyes and ears hear, what we allow to get into our psyches. But Dr. Thomas Sowell is correct. We are responsible for our success. We can't look and blame somebody else. We need to grow up and be the men and women of God that God would have us to be and be united, like our nation says. Well, that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. And as I always say, march on, warriors.